The janitor's shift had stretched late into the evening, the kind of silence where the hum of fluorescent lights felt louder than footsteps. He leaned on his mop handle, his back aching, but his eyes softened whenever he looked at his son. The boy, no more than 7, sat cross-legged near the edge of the polished lobby floor, carefully unwrapping a bundle of cookies they had baked together in their tiny apartment the night before. The sweet smell drifted faintly, mixing strangely with a scent of disinfectant. "Daddy, can I share one?" the boy asked, his voice small but hopeful. He pointed toward a woman seated alone on a black leather couch near the glass doors. Her posture was elegant, yet fragile, her shoulders trembling slightly as if she was carrying the weight of something too heavy to speak about. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and when the boy looked closer, he could see her wiping at her cheeks with the edge of her sleeve. The janitor stiffened. His cheeks warmed with embarrassment. "No, son," he murmured quickly, glancing around as if someone might scold them for even daring to notice her. "She's not like us. She doesn't need that." He gestured toward the napkin of uneven, slightly burnt cookies. The boy frowned, not understanding. To him, kindness wasn't measured by money, only by smiles. But as the janitor turned back to his mop, he felt the boy's small hand slip free from his own. When he looked up, his son was already halfway across the gleaming marble floor, clutching the cookie like it was treasure meant to save someone's day. The father's breath caught, his heart pounding in his chest, torn between stopping him and letting him go. The woman lifted her gaze at the sound of small footsteps approaching. At first, her brow furrowed in confusion. No one ever dared come close when she was like this, her tears usually guarded behind closed office doors. But here, in the emptiness of the lobby, a little boy stood before her, his shoes slightly scuffed, his hands cupped around a misshapen cookie wrapped in a crinkled napkin. "For you, lady," he said, his voice gentle yet certain, as though he had no doubt this was exactly what she needed. His smile was wide, innocent, untouched by the heaviness of the world. Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected kindness tonight. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her at all. Slowly, almost reverently, she reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed his. The warmth of his small hand startled her, grounding her in a way that the countless board meetings and hollow congratulations never did. Before she could thank him, a voice rushed in, sharp with panic. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He doesn't understand." The janitor appeared, breathless, gripping his son's shoulder and trying to pull him back. His eyes darted from her expensive suit to the uneven cookie, shame reddening his face. "He shouldn't bother you. Please forgive him." But she wasn't thinking of forgiveness. She wasn't thinking of wealth or appearances or the thin line between who belonged in this lobby and who didn't. She looked at the cookie in her palm, slightly cracked, uneven, but offered with a kind of purity that money couldn't buy. And before she knew it, her lips parted and a soft, broken whisper escaped. Her voice wavered, and with it, the tears she had been holding back slipped freely down her cheeks. Not of weakness this time, but of release, as if that small act of kindness had unlocked a dam she didn't realize she'd been holding. The boy tilted his head, watching her cry, but instead of pulling away like most adults would, he simply reached back into his napkin and pulled out another cookie. He climbed onto the couch beside her, his small legs dangling far above the polished floor. With complete sincerity, he held the cookie out to her again. "Daddy says I can't give too many away," he said with a conspiratorial whisper, "but you look like you need them more than me." The janitor froze mid-step, mortification burning his face. "Son," he began, his voice stern, but the words died in his throat when he saw her reaction. The woman pressed a trembling hand to her mouth and let out a laugh, soft, broken, and soaked with grief. She wasn't laughing at the boy, but at the aching irony of it all. In a world of luxury and power, the one thing that had reached her was a child's uneven cookie. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She inhaled shakily, clutching the cookie against her chest like it was a fragile gift of gold. "I just lost someone very dear to me," she admitted, her composure unraveling in front of a janitor and his son. Strangers she didn't even know. and no one even noticed. Everyone kept moving like nothing had changed. The boy, unbothered by her title, her tears, or the heaviness of her words, leaned gently against her shoulder. His small presence was steady, unshaken, as if comforting her was the most natural thing he could do. The janitor stood there in silence, torn between the shame of feeling out of place and the awe of watching his son's heart shine brighter than anything he could ever teach. For the first time in a long while, the woman didn't feel alone. When the woman finally stood, there was a new steadiness in her movements. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, careful not to let her vulnerability linger too long in front of strangers, and yet, these weren't strangers anymore. They had witnessed her at her weakest and offered something no board member, no assistant, no deal could give her: simple humanity. The janitor lowered his gaze, expecting her to leave without acknowledgement, maybe even complain to management about being disturbed. He braced himself for embarrassment, his mop handle clutched tight in his calloused hands. But instead, she stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the marble. She extended her hand toward him. "I'm Claire Williams," she said quietly, her voice still a little raw, but carrying the authority of someone used to being listened to. "CEO of this company." The janitor's breath caught. His rough fingers hovered uncertainly before meeting hers in a hesitant shake. He felt small, insignificant in the shadow of her title. But her eyes softened as they locked on his, and her next words carried more weight than the golden letters on her office door. "You raised a boy with more kindness than most men I've ever met," she said, glancing at the child who was now licking cookie crumbs from his hands, completely unaware of the magnitude of the moment. "Don't ever stop him from sharing it. The world needs people like him and fathers like you." The janitor blinked, his throat tightening. He had spent years scrubbing floors unseen, pushing his son to stay out of the way, teaching him to be quiet so the world wouldn't trample him. But now, in the glow of this unexpected moment, he saw that his son's light wasn't something to hide. As she turned to leave, her voice carried back like a promise. "For the record, this was the sweetest meeting I've ever had." The janitor stood there frozen, his heart lighter than his hands had felt in years, while his boy grinned proudly, holding up Teach.